Welcome to the Carolina Fire Watch, where we are your source for the North Carolina Fire Service news, training, leadership, and real-world lessons learned. From the mountains to the coast, we're powered by the pride, honor, and tradition of the Old North State. Now, let's get into today's show. Welcome, everyone, to the Carolina Fire Watch February episode. I'm Brian Kelly, your host, and with me today, I've got Assistant Chief Cooke of the Rocky Mount Fire Department and Craig Jarman with DOI Criminal Investigation Unit. What's going on, guys?
How you doing there? Good to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Man, I tell you what, we're going to talk today about something very unique, which is the largest structure fire in North Carolina Fire Service history. And when we kicked off the Carolina Fire Watch, we talked about how we were going to talk educational, informational, and lessons learned. And today's episode is all about lessons learned. Chief Cooke was not the first arriving unit, but he ended up being the incident commander for the majority of the operations. And we're going to talk strategies and tactics and some questions. And then we're going to talk with Chief Jarman, who was the lead investigator as part of the national call out that involved an ATF response from fire investigators from all around the country. And while we can't go into the specifics of the investigations, we're going to talk about how these two functions came together for the largest fire in our state's history. Y'all are definitely going to want to be able to tune in and listen in on this one. But first, before we dive into that, we're going to go over this month in fire service history. And last month we talked about some of the events in Newland, North Carolina, and this month we're going to talk about something that's a little bit more recent, and that is Charlotte Fire Department in February of 1988 introduced CAD, Computer Aided Dispatch. And so, what's unique about that is that Mike Lagares tells us about the fact that computer-aided dispatch is kind of the new and current way that we make sure that we get either the closest unit or even the most accurate unit to that fire. In fact, he tells us in February 15th of 1988, the Charlotte Fire Department implemented a computer-aided dispatch system within its Fire Communications Division. Charlotte's CAD system was based on originally developed for the Fort Worth Fire Department in Texas. According to the department's written history, the project took 2 years to complete and represented a major shift in how emergency calls were handled. The new systems automated clerical and record-keeping functions, allowing telecommunicators to focus more on decision-making and assigning fire companies. Oversight of the project was led by Division Chief Doug Cooke. Following Charlotte's implementation of CAD systems quickly spread to other major fire departments across North Carolina and eventually to departments and dispatch centers of all sizes. Before computer-aided dispatching, call taking and dispatch relied on a mix of handwriting call cards, mechanical timestamps, and manual tracking systems. Fire reports and alerting systems also varied widely. One of the most recognizable tools of the era were fire alarm street boxes, often referred to as the little red boxes on the corner, manufactured by companies such as Gamewell. These systems predated telephone alerting by decades and were used throughout much of the 20th century. And in some cities, including Raleigh, early fireboxes were initially locked. To report a fire, a citizen had to locate the key holder, unlock the box, and transmit the alarm. Raleigh's first fireboxes were installed in 1888 through locks that were eventually removed to improve access. Pretty cool, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat to see how far we've come. Everything from, nothing at all, just word of mouth, to call boxes, to computer-aided dispatch. Craig, you come from a both fire and law enforcement background. Law was more apt to use MDTs in the vehicles. In your mind, we were just talking before we hit record, you're not far from retirement. You've been on the streets for a long time. You've seen it probably come full circle. What was it like, kind of in your onset, the first time you got in the car and used your MDT?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great tool. It's like you said, we had MDTs back in my Kinston PD days. And the good thing about it on the law enforcement side really was like instantaneous info, instantaneous update. We had a link to the CAD system. So you were getting comments and the narratives as the dispatcher was getting them and putting them in, so, I mean, we were, by the time they could type it and then get on the radio and relay it, we were already reading it. So, I mean, it was definitely a great tool. It's hard to imagine what law enforcement was like before that, honestly.
Yeah. And now it's very unique. You walk into a fire station and you see a live CAD feed, and as they're EFDing or EMDing a call, you can watch them in real time typing and getting the information, and you can almost self-dispatch, if you will, or be moving towards the truck. And, as the old saying goes, when seconds count, we count seconds. And it's pretty cool to be able to see how far we've come, because with that CAD, we didn't have that ability. We didn't have that live feed. We didn't have that internet connection to be able to see that. How about for you, Chief Cooke? What is your years of service kind of taking you through CAD and MDTs and things like that?
Well, and for us, again, it was a very new technology. We thoroughly enjoyed being able to see those calls come across the board. When we first started, they were on our personal computers that we would have at the stations. So we would have those up and we would just watch them. And like you said, we could kind of self-dispatch, and what that played a role for us was response times. And that's the big thing now. So we're hitting response times. And so we went from having them on our station computers to now they're up and down the hall. They're on our telephones. They're on our trucks. It's one heck of a technology that has definitely benefited us in the fire service.
Yeah, it's not like people are saying, wow, you got here super fast, but they are saying, you're getting here quicker and quicker, which is what we need. So thank you to Mike Lagares for this month's Moment in Fire History. Y'all be sure to go check him out on Facebook and give him a follow. He's constantly sharing all kinds of fire history nuggets. And if your department wants to be highlighted, hit him up. If you've got something significant, he'd love to document that for you. Our next segment is going to be called the Carolina Fire Spotlight. And last month we had asked you if you had something to highlight to email us, thecarolinafirewatch@gmail.com. And we had some folks that submitted some stuff. And this one probably won't surprise you. This one goes to a legend, I think is a proper terminology to say, for a spotlight, and that's Chief Davy Summey. He's retiring this month after decades and decades of service. Some of the things that for those who are watching, you may not realize about him. Let me just read a couple little things about him. He's a longtime member of the North Carolina Association of Fire Chiefs. He serves as the fire chief of Cedar Mountain Fire Department. He's dedicated decades of service to fire prevention, investigations, and leadership. He's widely respected across the state for his fire service community. And Chief Summey's career reflects a deep commitment to service, leadership, and the advancement of the North Carolina Fire Service. We want to thank him, and I personally want to thank him as part of my time as County Fire Marshal for his impact and wish him the very best in his retirement. I know him and his wife are looking forward to time with their grandchildren and time at the beach. So a special shout out to the Carolina Fire Spotlight to Chief Davy Summey on his credible years as the Ratings Inspection Supervisor for the North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal. A couple more little special shout outs for some very well-deserving fire departments who between December and January received an ISO Class 1. The best of the best, guys. Mount Holly Fire Department earned their ISO Class 1. Lexington Fire Department received an ISO Class 1. Cumberland Road received an ISO Class 1. And Matthews Fire and EMS 2026 with an ISO Class 1 designation. That's pretty cool. A lot of hard work, right, guys?
Yeah, that is
Definitely.
that's a heck of a accomplishment.
Yeah, I know. When you look at departments, I think all of us have had a hand in their ISO and the amount of work that goes into it. A lot of people saying that ISO is a kinder, gentler. It may be kinder and it may be gentler, but it's still hard work. Any way you look at it, the hours and hours of dedication that it takes from members, officers to do documentation for the sake of the citizens and the taxpayers of our community. So well deserved for them. Just one reminder, this month we wrapped up January with regional association meetings all across the state. March, this is your midpoint reminder for your March scholarship deadlines for the NCSFA scholarships and also reimbursement. So if you have somebody who's needing an educational scholarship, check out the show notes or go back to one of our social medias. We've got the QR codes as well as any reimbursement for special events. So if it's midwinters, if you want to attend SAFER, certain different functions and trainings, as they'll reimburse up to $500 towards those expenses. Just go to that QR code on our socials or NCSFA.com and go under scholarship and it'll tell you all about eligibility. Y'all ready to dive into tonight's topic?
Yes, sir.
We're ready for it. So we're going to talk about, again, the largest structure fire in North Carolina's fire service history. And again, our goal today is to kind of talk about some lessons learned, but also to share. The beauty of a post-incident critique is so that way we can do it better the next time it occurs. And I'm sure, Chief Cooke, you probably wouldn't want to do that all over again. But for those who may have a big fire in their community, you'd surely love to leave them with a couple of tools in their toolbox. So with that being said, I'd like for you to kind of paint us a picture of that initial dispatch, if you can, and kind of tell us what the early indicators were for the scale of just how big it was and what those size up challenges were for you.
So this particular property, we didn't run auto aid. We didn't even normally run mutual aid to this location, but we got a call. The way it works right now is we got a call from our dispatch public service, and they let us know that there was some assistance needed. So when we go out of town for a normal mutual aid call, we've got a set resource list. Well, this particular one being a commercial, and I was the battalion chief on duty, so I said, okay, let's take a little different approach to this one. They're requesting an aerial device, so we're going to take an aerial, we're going to take a rescue company, a safety officer, and myself. So that's what we kind of started off with. That's what we sent initially. And once we have 2 battalion chiefs, and I called the other battalion chief and said, hey, I'm heading this way. This is what we got. I know this area. This is my volunteers mutual aid district. So I kind of knew what was going on with the building. I knew a little bit about it. I said, at best, they've got a fire. They need some help removing the smoke. It's really big. It's going to take a little time, but should be back. And we stayed on the phone. And as I got to going, I noticed there was a rather large glow that I was not expecting. And that let me know right then that this was not going to be something that we were going to come in and help shut sprinkler systems down and remove smoke and help with salvage and overhaul. I knew that we were going to be there for a while, and that was several miles away. So I knew it was going to be a large scale event even before we got there.
So let's go back even further. So this is a predominantly volunteer fire district, and for those that are listening, we invited the volunteer fire chief. We weren't able to make contact with him and follow up tonight. We were really hoping to have him on, and I'm sorry that we didn't for timing and scheduling purposes. And so with that being said, I think that the request for resources that you're talking about, again, they were, and so to make sure we understand that that's in a rural district, how far away geographically from the city of Rocky Mount is that facility to you guys? So that way people can understand kind of geographically where we're talking.
So we're probably 10 to 12 miles from our nearest station.
Okay, 10 to 12 miles away. We've got probably, had they already struck a second alarm and then made the request to y'all, or how did that work?
So what they did is they did call for some outside resources, and we were included in that. So they had already called most of the departments in the county at that point requesting help, and then Tarver Fire Department for an aerial, and then us for some assistance as well.
Okay. So getting up to that point, y'all have been requested. You're now responding. You see the glow. Paint me the picture of what it's like to arrive on scene and see what is causing that glow.
So by the time our companies arrived on scene, we were probably 45 minutes into the incident. So seeing everything that was going on and trying to just kind of get a handle on it, I remember one of the first things that I did is we sent out a group text whenever we have any type of working incident to our senior staff. And I remember saying, okay, there's no need to try to text this. I've got to get out and go to work. So I took a picture and I sent it to our group, and I said, this is going to say it all. This will tell everybody what I need to know, because I had to get my mindset of where we were going to go from here, because I knew that it was going to be a long-term event, and I knew that it was going to have to take all of us kind of put our heads together, because this was something that volunteer or paid, from my experience, I'd never been a part of.
Yeah. So to paint that picture, how big of a building are we talking?
You're talking 1.5 million square feet, and it was 75% involved by the time I got there.
So 1.5 million square foot, 75% involved, 45 minutes into the incident. And you've brought with you, let's go through that again. You brought an engine rescue, or excuse me, an aerial, a rescue, and yourself, and what other resources?
And a safety officer. So that's what we showed up with.
Okay. And so what's your next step once you arrive and you send that message? What do you do next?
Well, then it's time to go to work. And the first thing I did is, of course, I was met at the door by some of the the other departments, and the fire chief that was the incident commander at the time, and we kind of did a face to face. We talked. I said, "Hey, what can I help you do? What do you need?" Of course, we had a large amount of fire and lots of things going on that you would expect. So we kind of got our heads together of the first aerial placement where we were going to start there, and I started working that operation. And the safety officer that arrived on scene, I said, "Hey, let's let him be safety overall and start working out some things." So we kind of, between the rescue company and the ladder company, they were together, and then my safety officer was out on his own, kind of doing the best evaluation that he could.
And so as you guys kind of put your heads together, what are some of the things that y'all are talking through? I'm sure some type of tactical worksheet attempt to kind of catch up on the tactical worksheet is probably occurring, or even some type of can report of what's happening with all the units, and maybe even saying, do we have enough? So kind of talk me through that. Do you have enough water? Do you have enough aerials? Those kind of things.
So yeah, we did. We got together pretty quick, and we went to the back of my vehicle, and we just kind of started drawing this building out, and we started talking about things that had been done. I asked the questions: is everybody accounted for? Where is everybody at? As far as accountability, firefighter accountability and personnel accountability. So we were looking at both of those, trying to make sure that we had that under control. Then we started going through some of the tactical considerations. Where was the majority of the fire? We knew that the box that we had was, our goal was to keep it in that box, because we have other parts of the buildings that are not yet involved. So we wanted to kind of come up with a plan to let's hold down the fort and see if we can keep it pushed away from some of this other area, and know that part of this building is already lost.
So I was going to say, at that point, were you offensive, defensive, a combination of both? Did you have, what was going on?
So they did start offensive operations when I got there. It had gone to all defensive because of the growth of the fire. The escalation of the event it took that ability to put in, to do interior operations. It just took all of that away because it just wasn't safe.
I got you. And so at what point did you guys request more resources, and what does that look like? And now, how far away at this point, how far have you pulled resources, and what does that next wave of resources look like?
So it wasn't long after I got there that we started having some water issues. So what we ended up doing is we were fortunate enough, and I give kudos every day to our emergency management staff that they responded initially, and that was great because they were able to call our area coordinators, and our area coordinator was able to get on the phone and start reaching out to these fire chiefs, to these other counties. So I would say within 30 minutes or so of being there, we started reaching out and saying, all right, our counties surrounding us are not going to have what we need. So let's go ahead and let's reach out to as far west as Wake County and our eastern part. We went, I don't know how far out east we went, but we started bringing all those resources in and knowing that it was going to take time. And the things we were asking for were aerial devices. We were asking for tankers because, again, water supply was our big issue. So tankers were our main priority. And so that's what we started getting. And social media, it did us a favor this time because there was people everywhere that said, okay, this is on fire. And those people were firefighters. So those people were reaching out to their area coordinators or their local emergency managers and saying, hey, look, we can go. If they call us, we can go. And we had an influx of people that just, I think, self-dispatched, but initially self-dispatched, but they were going to be called for anyway. So it really worked out really good for us.
Yeah. Self-dispatching is not a good thing. We're not advocating for that. But at the same time, coordinated dispatching or availability, right? Like, if you will, in that instance, I think what you're advocating for is situational readiness, right? Like that's important. So you see it on social media, you let your area coordinator, hey, we're able, ready, and willing. That's a good thing. I want to go back, if I can, to kind of those resources. How long, and I'm going to come back to another question, but I want to go back to the question, how long did those resources from far away, how long did those operational periods, how many times or how many hours or how many days were those resources dedicated for? You're talking 1.5 million square feet. So this is not a 4-hour structure fire pack up and everybody goes home.
And that's exactly right. So the resources The heavy tanker shuttle lasted a better part of 36 hours. So all of these departments that had reached out to their emergency managers, when they pulled the trigger for them to come out and be with us and help us, they were there almost 36 hours at the longest. There were some that were less, some that were, maybe a little longer. So they come in and they hauled water. We would fuel them up, get them some rehab the best we could, and then they would keep going. So it was a very long operation, and it didn't settle down for a total of 10 days.
What kind of unique resources were you utilizing outside of, let's say, your run-of-the-mill fireground operations, so tankers or whatever? I mean, everything from, you're there that long. I mean, there's a need for bathrooms, there's a need for food, there's a need for these other things. So what are some of those unique resource requests were you utilizing? And then I've got a part two to that, which is what functions of the ICS did you guys have in play when it was all said and done?
So the unusual resources that we had is we had a full command post set up. We had, fortunately, with our emergency management and the North Carolina Forestry Service, they did a great job at setting all that stuff up for us. We ended up with bathrooms, and I'm not talking just porta-john. I'm talking about full bathrooms for us to be in, breakout rooms for crews to kind of debrief and to sit down and get away. And resources that we requested because of the large facility. We had multiple UTVs, side-by-sides running around to help. Forestry Service brought in 2 6,000-gallon tankers, which is unusual for us. Forestry Service did water drops, which had just been approved recently for the North Carolina Forestry Service to drop water on top of a structure. And they made multiple loads for us the next day. And so we did a full complement of the ICS system. We had it broke down to, who was paying for things. The next period, we would be working on our next operational period. During the day, we had someone dedicated to working on our IEPs. So it was really a full-blown disaster in that area. And we had to address all of the things that come with that. So our emergency management did a great job at helping us with that.
And the incident commander function, that stayed local, or was it leveled up? How did that stay, or how did that escalate, and how quickly?
So not long after getting there in the incident, the conversation between me and the volunteer chief was, "Hey, look, I'm going to I need you to take this because you're going to be able to stay here the whole time." And that's where it stayed in my hands as the overall incident commander until we got into the investigation phase. Once we did that, then Mr. Jarman and his crowd did a whole lot of, we kind of supported them. We backed off and made sure that there was fires taken care of and anything that they needed. But once it was turned over to the investigation part, that's when it was left. Otherwise, we held on to it the whole time.
All right. Craig, I'm going to ask you one question, and then I'm going to go back to Chief Cooke. How quickly in that 10 days did you guys come into the scene? And then part 1A of that question is, and how quickly did you start working during that 10 days?
So actually, I received the first call at 4:20 that morning from the Edgecombe County Emergency Services, the fire marshal's office. So I was actually on scene by 6:20 that morning. So I was there pretty early on into the operational period. I mean, there was still a lot of extinguishment efforts going on. But as far as the investigation standpoint, I mean, it pretty much started immediately. We obviously couldn't get in the building and do a excavation or examination. There was a lot of people to talk to. So we immediately started trying to identify employees that may have information for us. And a big part that we wanted to do just to help Chief Cooke and his crowd out was try to help with that accountability. I mean, there was a lot of employees in the building, and so we were trying to help with that. So that's kind of the role we filled early on while suppression efforts were still going on. But it started pretty early into the operational period.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask that question now before we dive into investigations, because in an incident that is so demanding, I guess is the best way to say that, Chief Cooke, you don't want to turn down any hands, because hands can be used for a variety of different things. So whether those investigators can be accountability, they can perform a safety function, whatever. sometimes those folks can really help, even though they can't make entry into that building. So going back to that, what does well, first off, where did they get the airdrop from the water? I got to ask that question because that's a unique thing. I mean, for proximity to that water source, where are they pulling that from that airdrop? That blows my mind.
So in this particular one, the Forest Service they'll use aircraft, winged aircraft, and then they'll use the helicopters. And this one, we got the helicopters.
Sure.
They hold almost 500 gallons. And there was a pond that they were dipping out of that was probably 2 or 3 miles away. So they
Oh,
would
wow.
go in there and dip from that pond and come in and hit those target areas. And when they hit them with precision now. That they're dead on it.
So with that being said, what is the biggest, because that helps with manpower, right? And fatigue, and just like you said, that is accuracy. And so I don't want to say we're not wasting water, but we're not wasting water. Any idea of the amount of water that was flowed out there? Have y'all even begun to try to even remotely calculate that?
So what they're telling us, the best they could tell us is we were 30 million gallons in the first 24 hours.
30 million gallons. Wow, that's impressive. And that's only in the first 24. Do you have a total for like the whole incident?
No, but I will say the first 24 hours, shortly thereafter, the use of water, it decreased because the box was burning up or we had put it out. So you would probably be real close to your 30 million gallon mark. And not a lot of that because the next one was just mop up fires.
I got you. And a lot of probably hand cleanup, for a lack of terminology, like you said, mop up. Speaking of that, what kind of water sources were you guys using during that time? I mean, I imagine, you're not pulling from all, pressurized water systems. You're probably doing some drafting operations and things like that. Is that an assumption that's accurate on my part, or?
Well, funny you say that because we explored all those options because water supply was an issue. We were on that grid with QVC for the longest time until we drained it dry. We took every bit of that water that we could. There's a river and a beautiful place to draft from, and we were in the middle of a significant drought. So all of our ponds and our rivers were too low to do any drafting from. So what we had to do is move off the grid. So our tanker shuttles ended up being upwards of 6 miles away from the fire scene. So that's what it took for us to get off the grid and get to some decent water.
So talk to me about that. What kind of challenges did that create for y'all, right? I mean, did that restrict your GPMs on your flows? And if so, by how much? I mean, not to nerd out, right? But like, those are some of the operational challenges that you went through. You've got a drought, we certify water points. We're supposed to deal with that 100-year drought, and we're supposed to be able to sustain so much. We want 1,000 gallons within a mile, that kind of stuff. We preach that in rural water supply. Like, what does that look like for y'all that night?
So fortunately, with the influx of tankers that we had, we were able to keep that rolling. So when they started backing up, they started moving those water points off grid, and the whole reset of the fire and resetting all of our aerial devices. So we were able to keep that supply up. We were able to supply those aerials and that sprinkler system without interruption. And that was,
wow.
That was that coordinated effort of our water supply officer and our local departments educating our incoming resources as to where those water points were, and really being on top of the game when it comes to that. So we were fortunate enough that we really didn't have to cut our GPMs. Once we got our operation back up and running from losing the municipal water supply, we were able to keep it going as long as we needed.
I don't want to put you on the spot with this or even ask you to answer it in your official capacity, but maybe in your personal preference or personal statement is, do you feel that like a tanker task force that we're hearing, or tender task force or whatever, that I don't know if they have one in this county particularly, but like, that's the benefit of it. I could see where that would really show and be beneficial, some of these pre-coordinated, predetermined resource requests.
Absolutely. I'll say that our neighboring county and in the city, we're split county. So we're Nash and Edgecombe County. So in Nash County, the last couple of years, probably stemming from this fire, they have developed a tanker task force. And while we're a municipality and we don't run tankers, we're part of that training. And we've seen it on some of our larger fires with them that it has definitely been beneficial because everybody works together. They kind of know how those large tanker operations are going to go. They know that I'm not going to be sitting here for just 1 minute before I dump. I may be 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes before I get to dump my water, and I may not go to a close water site. So I feel like that's been real beneficial for us locally to see that come about.
And I think you kind of hit on something that you said, even though we don't do tankers, we've even started having the conversation, and I think there's a lot of municipal departments that are greater than 85% coverage, and they say, well, I don't need to worry about this. That need to start worrying about it, because it's not a matter of if they have a fire, it's when they have a fire. They need to have a plan for those large potential lost fires, of who they're going to call and where they're going to call, and how they're going to set up those resource requests and where they're going to pull their water from. So that way they will have it already kind of predetermined, and where they go. So I love it. Let's transition a little bit into the investigation phase for Chief Jarman, and then we may come back with some additional questions. So Chief Jarman, as you guys are on scene and you're working through those, initial interviews, sadly, there was a loss of life on this fire. What does that look like for y'all? How quickly are you guys able to go in and do that part of the investigation? And like I said, I know we can't talk specifics. So if I go down a road any way, shape, or form that I can't, by all means, I know you've told me no before in our professional capacity. So don't be afraid here in our, in our interview here. So
Yeah. So as far as actually getting in the building and starting the examination, that really didn't occur until I believe it was on Tuesday. So a lot of the initial interviews and stuff like that were being conducted, early on Saturday and into Sunday, and then we started bringing in some of our other partners on Monday, and that's when the decision was made based off the sheer size of it to activate the ATF's National Response Team. So that happens quickly when you pull the trigger on that. So that's a tremendous resource that's out there. So they were boots on the ground starting Monday afternoon, and then it really, as far as the scene examination, really kind of ramped up on Tuesday.
So for those who don't know and who aren't investigators, what is an ATF national response? What does that request look like, and what do you get?
So to request it, basically, you coordinate with your local, ATF fire investigator, which we're fortunate to have several in this state. So in this particular instance, it was Special Agent Chad Edmonds with the ATF that I began coordinating with, along with our partners with the State Bureau of Investigation. They were on the scene pretty early on as well, and we kind of worked it jointly until we made the call to Chad with ATF. And he came in on, I believe, Sunday or Monday. And like I said, then he made the decision to pull the trigger on the National Response Team. And basically what that gets you is a full gamut of response from the ATF. And it's everything from certified fire investigators to engineers to regular special agents to assist with interviews to K-9 teams to, basically anything you would need. So like I said, they rolled in on Monday night, Tuesday, kind of put a plan together and really hit the ground running. So I kind of went back and looked at some notes on this. Obviously the fire's been a couple of years, because I want to make sure I have my facts straight. So I kind of went back and looked at some reports and stuff, and I believe that the ATF rolled in with a total of 43 personnel, somewhere around that number. And again, that's everything from engineers to fire investigators to agents to do interviews. So that's a tremendous resource that we were able to utilize here.
And so those demands are not the same as they are on the scene. I mean, they're going to be utilizing the restroom facilities. They're going to be utilizing some of those other things, but they are a little more self-sustaining, right? So their operational period, they're nationally deployed. So they have a need for sleeping facilities and, food, things like that. So what does that, I mean, on a national call out, what does that look like for y'all?
They pretty much have their procedures in place. Of course, they did roll in with a command post of their own. Chief Cooke can probably talk about this too. I think I lost count of how many command buses and whatnot were out there at one point in time. I think everybody kind of rolled in with their own. But the ATF comes in, they bring it all. So they come to be pretty much self-sufficient, because part of that is I think they realize that this local agency is dealing with a pretty tremendous loss and a pretty big incident. So they don't want to come in and be a burden, if you will. So they're designed to be self-sufficient when they show up.
And I would dare say, and I want to go back to Chief Cooke just for a second, and then we're going to bounce back to you, Craig. How many different federal agencies or state agencies did you have that responded outside of ATF? The National Response Team. Did you have other agencies, OSHA, DENR, any of those other ones? Did they come? I know when we interviewed Daryl, he had any and everybody on that explosion. Was that similar for you?
Well, we didn't get a lot of the OSHA response, but we did have not counting, well, it did include the ATF's response team and all, but total resources, there was 101 agencies, different agencies that we were able to count that come out to play. And that was a tremendous response.
I was going to say 101 different agencies. And how many different personnel? Did you get a total count of number of personnel that were able to be on that scene, assistant, out of 101 agencies?
We never got a total from all the mutual aid fire departments, but in the city of Rocky Mount, we ended up with 55 in that total response just from our organization. And it was 70 straight fire departments. So 73 fire departments from east and west of us through the coordination of and the local emergency management staff come out to help. So a personnel count was, that's just something we weren't able to get.
Wow. That's impressive. And if we have time in this episode, I want to come back and just ask about the documentation of that. How do you measure that? How do you maintain accountability of that? So we're going to come back to that. But I want to go back to Chief Jarman because I want to make sure I ask some questions because I know we have, and I'm going to brag here for a second. I've been a member of our IAAI chapter for a long time, International Association of Arson Investigators. We have I think what we're the second largest chapter in the country. Is that right?
Maybe the largest, but it's pretty, yeah.
I was going to say either it's the second or the largest. So I know we're going to have lots of listeners that are going to tune into this episode. On
and
a national,
and they'll correct us on that if we're wrong. I'm sure.
I know. Drop it in the comments. Did we get that right or did we get that wrong? Because Craig's on their board, and so anyways, they'll love to throw some salt at Craig. So with that being said, national call out. How do you we are taught as investigators about mobile investigators on site. You have 43 people. So obviously, who is lead on that national call out, and how do you handle everything from evidence to photography to chain of custody to scene preservation? Talk me through that whole process and how that's coordinated through with the incident commander.
Yeah. So, and the 40 some I mentioned earlier was just ATF personnel. Add in the State Bureau of Investigation and Office of State Fire Marshal and the DOI agents that we brought in. That number of total just people there for the fire investigation goes to about 150. So that's actually through the course of it, as far as just the fire. And that's not including personnel from Rocky Mount Fire Department, some of their fire investigators, Edgecombe County Emergency Services, and also the Edgecombe County Sheriff's Office. So that number is actually probably a little higher. So it's a divide and conquer. I mean, it's very similar to Chief Cooke mentioned, the IAPs earlier and having an IAP for every operational period. It's very similar. It's tasks are assigned and based off the day and what needs to be accomplished that day. And there were a lot of moving parts and there are things going on at different places. We decided very early on that not everybody needed to operate from the actual scene. So we were able, with the help of some local officials there, to secure basically space at the convention center. And that's where a lot of the investigative stuff was ran out of, as far as the interviews and the coordination and stuff like that.
I was going to say, tell us what kind of stuff is done off site versus what's on site. Kind of take us through that. Yeah.
Sure. So when the ATF National Response Team comes in, again, they also bring some of their regular special agents, and what they do, especially in large fires like this, and this was the first for me, so it was a great learning experience, is they set up what's called a leads desk, and that's where all the interviews are coordinated from. So that was actually my role during a huge part of this is I was teamed with the ATF special agent, Brian Schuford, who was running that leads desk for ATF, and it was kind of our job to coordinate interviews and to assign tasks from teams of investigators that would go out and interview. And as you can imagine, when the fire happened, these employees were, a lot of them were like, well, we're not going to be working anytime soon. And I mean, they were gone.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to track them down, whether that's at home or at, mama's house or sister's house or wherever. So a lot of that was done. All of that actually was done and coordinated from the convention center. And then at the end of every day, the investigators who were on site actually doing scene examinations would come back to the convention center, and we would basically have a debriefing at the end of every day. Here's what we learned today. Here's what we accomplished. Here's what still needs to be done. This is what we need to look at tomorrow, and that kind of stuff. The other thing we did very early on is, as you can imagine, and Chief Cooke can probably attest to, when you get a fire of this magnitude, is you got to deal with county and city officials, and you got to deal with politicians, and you got to deal with the news media, and you got to deal with attorneys. Not only QVC's attorneys. Imagine, if you will, how many different products roll through that distribution center, how many different manufacturers you're dealing with. I mean, this hit national news very early. So, the amount of attorneys and private investigators that showed up very early on was a bit overwhelming. So we were able to utilize some space at a facility close by to where we kind of were able to keep all of those type people, and that we would give periodic briefings throughout the day, and we would do press releases throughout the day and things like that. So I think what really made it work is that we were able to divide it up. We were fortunate enough to have several different facilities close by that we could use, and it didn't have to all be done from the scenes. Like I said, we were able to divide those resources up.
Well, let me kind of just, I don't want to say put a bow on it, but kind of to that point, I think you painted a pretty good picture. What's the status of the investigation now? I know we really can't do a whole lot of talking about it, but so that way people understand that 2 years later, this is where it is.
So officially, again, ATF, once the National Response Team came into play, ATF is the lead on the case, and then each agency obviously has their own lead. The SBI would have what they call a case agent. I was the case agent for DOI, but the actual lead rests with the ATF. Their case is closed, and I did confirm that last week. And the official cause right now remains undetermined, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I was going to say, let's talk about what that means, for those that are, I hate to say tailboard and riding firefighter. Tailboard's not right anymore, right? But they're the backwards facing firefighter who's like, what does that even mean? You got somebody who's died and 1.5 million square foot burnt. What does undetermined mean? So let's give them a down and dirty of the 4 classes of fires and why we rule something undetermined real quick for those people.
Sure. So your 4 classifications, as identified in NFPA 921, are accidental, natural, incendiary, or intentionally set, and then undetermined. And when you arrive at an undetermined classification, it basically means that there was more than one possibility or high probability, and you couldn't rule out one over the other. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we got no idea what happened. It means that we might have been able to narrow that down to 2 or 3 possibilities, and we couldn't put any more weight on one than the other. So officially, you have to leave that fire as undetermined.
Yeah, and I want to go back to this as a certified fire investigator who's been doing it a long time. I would have a lot of my former instructors who would say incendiary and arson are different. Arson is the crime, incendiary is the cause. So please, for our folks that are listening, please don't call a fire arson. I can remember so many people that would ride around with arson investigator on the back of their shirt. Arson is the crime. Incendiary is the classification, so anyways, that's a little sidebar, a little rant, if you will, from my instructors from years ago. It's kind of like the difference between smoke alarm and smoke detector. That got beat into my head many years ago.
If you notice, you don't see as many arson investigator T-shirts and lettering on vehicles now as you used to.
Yeah, because we've been getting it right. And that was kind of the point of this episode, is to make sure that, not that anything's wrong. And I think these 2 guys can talk about that. But man, I would dare say they've learned some lessons. Everything from Chief Jarman, who said, this is my first response, ATF. I learned some things. Chief Cooke, who shared about, the tanker task force on their response, how they learned some things. So, as we come to kind of the close of this segment, guys, is there anything that you want to leave to the listeners and the viewers that if you could say there's one thing that really was a lesson that I learned in my role on this fire, it would be this. We'll start with you, Chief Cooke. What was the biggest takeaway for you now that you've been promoted and you're that assistant chief of operations? What is it?
So I'd say my biggest takeaway from that fire is how important a strong command presence is. It's essential to success.
A strong command presence. I love it. How about you, Chief Jarman?
I would say just recognizing the resources that you have available. I mean, the fact that even though it was the largest fire loss in North Carolina history, that we were able to put 150 plus fire investigators on the ground within a couple of days and accomplish what we did. This always stood out to me, so I'm gonna kind of brag a little bit. And again, it was a joint effort between ATF, SBI, DOI, and OSFM, and local agencies. But I was told that between firefighters and employees, there were well over 100 interviews conducted within that first 24 to 36 hours of hitting the ground running. And I was told at the time that that was the highest of any ATF National Response Team activation or call out that those ATF guys could recall. So I think the state of North Carolina is very fortunate to have a lot of resources when it comes to fire investigation. And I'm not just saying that from my agency, but, from the SBI, from the ATF, from all agencies involved, and recognizing the resources that are there, knowing who to call, and getting those on the road early, I think is the biggest thing. I probably had a similar reaction as Chief Cooke had when I rolled in that parking lot at about 6 o'clock that morning. I knew that we were in for some long days, but having the help that came and getting accomplished what we did was I think truly remarkable.
Guys, I can't thank you enough for sharing this information. If you guys that are watching or listening have more questions, comments, drop them into the comment section. We'd love to continue this on whatever platform it is that you're watching, and we'll continue that dialogue. Who knows? This may even turn into a class somewhere, a conversation, maybe a part 2, maybe we can get these guys on a live on some platform and do a Q&A. I don't know. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I think they've shared a lot of good information. So again, thank you guys. And y'all ready to have some fun with some Bucket Brigade?
Sure.
Let's go for it.
He said, yeah, whatever. Right. So for those who don't know, Bucket Brigade is a fun segment where we basically have 100 questions. These guys are going to take turns going back and forth, not really against each other, but randomly picking a number, 1 through 100. They're going to get 5 opportunities, and I'm going to read a question, answer as quickly as you can. It's Bucket Brigade, right? So we're trying to put that fire out as fast as we can. But feel free to pause and kind of check it out. See, look if you got any rekindles or any flashes if you want to add to, because it is fun to do that. So, Craig, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
You get to go. Pick a number, 1 through 100.
24.
For funniest travel mishap.
So going to the National Fire Academy a couple of years ago with some of my OSFM partners that you may know, Brian Wade, Tyler Moore, Daryl Rayner. I had a blowout in my truck, and it was quite a comical event because I always say this, Tyler Moore was like a NASCAR pit crew. Like, I think he was thriving at the chance to change the tire, and he basically jumped out and went to work and changed it. But my spare was flat too. And then we had to try three different service stations before we could find some place that we could find air. Yeah. That was
well,
and
if
you know those guys, being in the truck with those guys when something like that is going on was just like side splitting.
Well, what I want to know is it typical state workers, one guy doing the work and 3 guys watching.
That was pretty much it. I'd say me and Wade were supervising. Tyler was doing the work, and in typical Daryl Rayner fashion, he was telling him what he was doing wrong. So that's pretty much how it went.
Much love to all those guys, and I got to throw a jab into them whenever I can. All right, Chief Cooke, what's your number?
62.
62. All right, number 62. He's going to get the best meal you've ever had.
Best meal that I've ever had. I'd have to say I went to Chicago to the Chop House, and we had the Chop House steak, and that was probably the best steak and meal I'd ever had.
All right. So a lot of folks know I love to cook. It's kind of my gig. And if you saw me stand up, you'd know why. Anyways, my question is, what are the sides? So you got a chop house steak. What's your sides that you go put along with it?
So we had Brussels sprouts, and then we had some garlic mashed potatoes.
That's what's up. I like it. All right. Very good. Craig, what's your number 2?
77.
77, keeping it there. Most unusual talent or party trick you've shown off. I'm ready for this one. I think it's going to be an IAAI conference story here.
That's a difficult one. Some of them I don't feel like I should talk about.
Probably not.
Yeah, most unusual party trick. I won't say it's a party trick, but a lot of people don't know that I am a percussionist. I've played drums since high school.
Okay.
And I was actually in the ECU marching pirates, so I was a band.
No
geek,
kidding.
So a lot of people
No
don't know that.
kidding.
Yep.
I did not know that. How about
Yep.
that? Go Pirates. Arg. All right. Chief Cooke, what you got? Number
21.
2. 21. All right. That one is a place in the world you'd love to visit. What is it?
Barbados.
Barbados. Why Barbados?
I'm getting older and I want to travel, and that's one that I've picked out. And as our group, we'll kind of get out there and say, all right, we might play a card game inside. This is where we're going to go next. And we're always in state. And if I ever get to get them to play that out of state card game and international trip, that's going to be my place to go. It's just me looking at it. I've always wanted to check it out and spend some time.
Well, I hope you get to go for sure. All right, Craig, what's your number 3?
Let's go with number 1.
Number 1, weirdest fear you've ever had.
I am pretty petrified of snakes. I don't know if that's a weird fear, but I don't want anything to do with them.
All right,
It
guys.
doesn't matter what kind of snake.
IAAI guys, you got it right there.
Yeah,
Noted.
I do. It's kind of a running thing at our house. If we have a snake issue, my wife takes care of the snakes and I take care of the spiders. So that's how we make it work.
Hey, if you're not 50-50, what are you, right? In marriage.
There you
go. All right, Chief Cooke, what's your number 3?
98.
98. All right. Favorite moment from the past year?
Favorite moment from the past year. Oh, that's easy. My son graduating high school and getting his firefighter certification.
There you go. I love
That would be it. He got it both at the same time. He graduated from high school, turned 18 just before that, and he had been working on his firefighter certification, so we got it all at once. So that's probably been the best part of my year.
So let's give him a shout out. What's his first name?
His first name's Kyle.
Well, congratulations, Kyle, on you being your dad's top moment in 2025. And congratulations on that certification and graduation. All right, Craig, what's your number 4?
12.
Let's go back up. Small thing that instantly makes your day better.
I'm fortunate enough now to get to work from home a lot if I'm not on the road at a fire scene or something. And I think my number one thing every day is when my little girl gets off the school bus and walks through the front door. The way she greets me every day. So, yep.
That's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's got to be real cool. I love it. All right, Chief Cooke, what's your number 4?
75.
75. Y'all got my thumbs going back and forth. All right. The first thing you'd buy if you won the lottery, what would it be?
Easy. A farm.
A farm. Okay. What are you doing on that farm?
Being away from the majority of the people and having my dog available.
I love it. I mean, is it pastures? Are you growing anything? What are you doing on that farm?
No, I don't want to grow anything. I want woods and a yard and the dog, and then I'm good. I don't need anything else.
That's it. You just want to cut out a little hole right in the middle, build a house, and not be bothered.
That's exactly right.
Hey, I can symbolize with that for sure. All right, Craig, give me your last one, number 5.
I'll keep you close. I'll do 70.
All right, 70. Funniest rookie mistake.
I'd say very early on in my Kinston PD days, when we were rookies, we used to have to work the front desk, work the records desk. And obviously, the doors were secured and people would come up and they had a camera and a little, microphone or whatever. And you had to buzz people in. And we had one come up to the back door one day in the back hallway and I wouldn't let them in. And come to find out it was the newly hired city manager, which I did not know. So somebody eventually walked into the room and heard the conversation and told me who it was and hit the button to let them in. And lesson learned that day. Know who your city officials are. So,
well, if they would have sent an email or he would have had his badge out where you could have seen it, it wouldn't have been a problem, right?
Yep, there you go.
Communication is key. All right, Chief Cooke, let's get your last one.
All right, let's do 100.
100. I like it. A weird or funny tradition from your family or your friends?
Weird or funny tradition. Well, it's kind of back to the friends. We pick our trips and our vacations over card games most of the time. We all just write down what we want, and if you win the hand, that's where we end up.
Wow. What? So when you say a hand, is it like poker or what? I mean, what kind of card game is it?
Yeah, most time we'll do a poker game or just whatever card game we want to pick out that time, and we'll all have, that'll be our bid, is whatever place we want to go.
And I gotta ask, not that I'm trying to get all up in your business, but like, how many people are we talking? How big is this hand? Like, is it like 5 people, 10 people, 20 people? I mean, what are we talking here?
Most time it's about 8 of us.
Wow. That's a big crowd.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, thank you guys for doing Bucket Brigade. Hopefully this was a fun time for you. Hopefully people learn things. I learned something about Craig. My man is an AC/DC drum major guy. He's percussions for sure. All things aside, it's really good. And thank you guys for watching today. Again, if you've got a spotlight of somebody you want to give a shout out, send it to us, thecarolinafirewatch@gmail.com. If you want to keep the conversation going, drop a comment in the socials. But my call to action for this month is, what's the biggest fire that you've ever responded to? Drop it in a comment. Let us know. And we'd love to kind of keep this conversation going. Again, guys, thank you guys for joining us. This has been a great conversation for us here today in the month of February. So that way we can kind of prepare and train for the spring months coming up ahead. Thank you guys for coming.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks for the invite. I enjoyed it.
For sure. And you guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next month on the Carolina Fire Watch.